Senran Kagura Burst Re, which is a remake. Which is a remake of the 3DS title, is
No,
coming
no,
to the
no, no. It's the
PlayStation
remake of
4.
the 3 double DS version.
Okay,
You have to get that double
okay.
D in there.
They
But
did get the
if you
double
ever
D's in there.
Yes, they did. Not that I would know.
if you enjoy ninjas, girls with big anime girls with big boobies, stripping off their clothes to enhance their power, Senran Kagura is probably right up that alley for you. And
Just
when I say stripping off their clothes, they don't go full they don't go full frontal. No nudity. Little light covers up the naughty parts. So yeah.
uh,
Let's go to our correspondent Anita Sarkeesian for this one. Anita, what do you feel about this game?
yeah,
This
you want to give
game
her a
is
heart attack?
sexist. It should be banned from everybody. No, no. Okay, moving
This
on.
game
No
might
one
not.
cares what
You know what? I guarantee you, 100%, she's not going to comment on this game at all. And you know why she's not going to comment on this game? Because this game's not popular enough to make her a name. So she's not going to touch this one at all. She could probably care less if this was Zelda. If this
It's
was
empowering
something else
women.
that had. Yeah, if this was something else that was a bigger deal, she'd probably jump all over something like this. But it's fine, I guess.
Just Anita, I just want you to know that this game has some awesome superhero women in there. Just saying. You said you needed more female characters in video games. There you go. All females, no men. I think there's like one guy in the Peach Beach Splash, no shirt, no shoes service edition, all service edition. There's like one guy. He's a commentator. Not that I would know. Moving on.
Alrighty.
Got a poster on his wall.
So the last little bit of video game news we have before we get into our discussion topics here is Fear Effect Sedna is coming to the Nintendo Switch. I actually didn't even know they were making another Fear Effect game, which is pretty cool in itself. But it is coming to the Switch. More support for the Nintendo Switch. Always a good thing in my book. But for those of you who do not know, Fear Effect was a game created by Eidos back in the PlayStation era. They were both they were revered as really great games from what I heard. I never got a chance to play them, but they have always been up there on my list of PlayStation games to go back and play. So it's nice to see it getting another sequel. It's nice to see all these games really from the 90s making a comeback. It just puts a big old shit-eating grin on my face and makes me giddy.
I do want to add that I think, yeah, what you just mentioned right there is good. That we're actually getting a lot of games from the '90s, just kind of coming back or just anything. I never played the Fear Effect game, but if you're saying it's like from the '90s or 2000s, I think bringing back games from those eras, it gives a chance for developers to kind of look at those games and just get ideas or just kind of look back at them and say, oh yeah, well this worked. Why haven't we done any more things on this or like use any mechanics like that? Because if you really think about it, we don't have a lot of variety as much as we did back then. Like if you think about the PlayStation library, how many different games did you have on that console like different genres? You get the freaking collectathons, JRPGs, RPGs,
Genres that they don't even do anymore.
yeah.
Unless outside of indie developers. That's funny. I'm thinking about it. I never. What are the chances that all three of us, none of us, have played Fear Effect? I had to stop and think about it for a second. Exactly what Fear Effect was.
I had to look
the
it
name
up.
rang a bell, but I just couldn't remember. And now that you said PlayStation 1, now it's starting to ring a bell. Yeah, I had never had a chance to play this, but to expand upon, what you're saying there about early 90s games coming out, this is awesome. And I like the direction that they're going with this, and to me, the biggest beneficiary of this is the person who loved platformer games, because that seems to be one that's getting targeted highly.
Yeah.
Crash Bandicoot, and then you have the the ukulele, stuff like that. And even to some degree with newer titles, with like games like Cuphead that are kind of throwbacks to older style games, run and guns, which we don't have very often anymore, and a platform shooter, that sort of thing. So you're absolutely 100% right like 90% of games that come out now are either one of three things: a sports game, an action RPG, or a first-person shooter. That's really the bulk of what we get anymore, and a lot of stuff is not... honestly, I think it's an attempt to not oversimplify things, but sometimes simple games are the best ones. You know, the platformers, the little puzzle games, sometimes those are the best games to play, and it's sad that we don't have that kind of that wide base of genres to choose from. There's stuff that came out for the PlayStation that I don't even know how I would, label them. Like, I don't know if you remember the game IQ, like puzzle game.
That rings a bell.
Puzzle game, something like that. I don't know, but it would be awesome to see the late '90s, the early '90s, whatever, have a full-on comeback. The retro nostalgia, aside from the retro nostalgia factor, a lot of people that are growing up, like we just discussed this before we got on here about you, Shroom, how you're not somebody who necessarily grew up in the early '90s. You kind of caught the tail end of the '90s, but the way you were brought up and where you were brought up, you had the chance to experience all this. So somebody who is in your age range can appreciate these games.
Yeah.
They just don't have access to them. You had access to them.
Yeah.
They don't have access to them. And with retro game prices the way they are, and you see how hard it is to get the SNES Mini and stuff like that, that it's almost like the developers are taking the responsibility of this to get people of a new generation to play these games. And I really think that a lot of people that didn't have a chance to enjoy these games in the early '90s will be very surprised and pleasantly surprised on how much fun these games were to play. It's not Madden, it's not Call of Duty, it's not The Witcher, it's something else. It's Cuphead. It's an older style game that we don't get to experience very often anymore. But that seems to be changing.
Yeah, and that's kind of what saddens me with all these people who go and complain about the remakes. There's nothing wrong with these remakes because it does, like you said, Non. It gives people a chance to replay these games. Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, prime example of this. How many kids nowadays would take a look at the PlayStation titles and go, I can't play this, the graphics look horrible. And rightly so. Back then they were great, but they haven't aged well. Giving it that little fresh coat of paint, keeping everything intact, makes it more accessible to everybody to play, and gives it a chance to shine again.
And Crash Bandicoot is exactly the way I would like to see remakes done. Keep the game the way it was, polish it up. They can add stuff into it, I was kind of disappointed. I think
they didn't really add anything.
The same mindset. They didn't add like galleries and stuff, and I really like that sort of thing. Anytime they would remake or port a Final Fantasy game, they would add, maybe a side dungeon. Maybe they would add the bestiary would be in there and stuff like that. You could go back galleries for artwork and music and stuff like that. Just like
extra
that
stuff, But yeah, they didn't really do it with that game.
But aside from that, the way they remade the game was absolutely perfect. It felt like playing Crash Bandicoot with just better graphics.
Yeah, it did. The weird thing is when I was playing it, because it has been forever since I played original Crash Bandicoot. I think it was years. Last time I played it was, I guess at the time they were bringing out Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex for the PlayStation 2 and the GameCube. But other than that, like my cousins, these are just... What happened? I think we're having an echo.
Seems like you got a little bit of echo somewhere.
Plugged.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry. Talking of Crash Bandicoot made me want to go play it.
The way... what was I saying? Damn. I lost my thought.
You were talking about Cortex Strikes Back was the last thing you said. It came...
Yeah, I was like anything close to it, but even at that, it wasn't a Crash. It didn't feel like Crash, like the original ones. And when I played the Crash Bandicoot, the Insane Trilogy, I don't know why, but the graphics, I guess when you're a kid, or when you play games like from a long time ago, like if you look back at games you played, they looked a lot better back then, you know? So when I played Crash Bandicoot, the Insane Trilogy, to me it looked like the graphics never changed. It just looked like the way I remember it because your imagination runs wild, I guess. But looking back at it now, it's obvious in how different it is, you know, in terms of the way it looks.
Yeah, you see the side by side, and you're like, oh, damn.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, how could I tell that that was a prune fruit or what? What are those fruits called? Are they mangoes?
I always called them apples. I don't know what exactly
Apples,
they were
yeah.
called.
And me and my cousins would get into arguments like they're mangoes or they're apples and start fighting each other. But
I knew they weren't apples. That's just what I called them, though.
yeah, but yeah, like I couldn't tell, and now I'm just. It's good to see. Like I see my little brother, or like I just see someone else. Like I have two younger sisters. I got to show them this game. That this I got to tell them like, look, this is what I played. You know, when I was younger, and it just it opens an audience. Like you said, it opens a broader audience for kids or just people to kind of look back at these games and enjoy them for what they are, and look what the kind of legacy that they built for them and for the companies.